In today's video, I want to take you back to the 2015 NHL Draft, where we almost seen a major blockbuster trade happen between this year's Western Conference Final participants, the San Jose Sharks and the St. Louis Blues. We'll discuss what almost happened coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned, today I want to discuss the 2015 NHL Draft and a blockbuster trade that we almost seen go down between the Blues and the Sharks, would certainly make these two teams look very differently here today, as they currently are doing battle in the 2019 Western Conference Final, with one of them moving on to play for Lord Stanley's Cup here against the winner of the Eastern Conference Final, the Bruins and the Hurricanes. Now let's take a look here back at the 2015 Draft quickly first before we get into the trade details. Of course, this is better known as the Connor McDavid Draft, when the Oilers had the honor and privilege of selecting number 1 overall here yet again and getting this generational talent. So first of all, I'm going to put a quick graphic up here on the screen, courtesy of HockeyDB.com. If you ever want to get any details on previous NHL drafts or a lot of other great details, I highly recommend this site as a great point of reference. HockeyDB.com is a terrific place to get lots of information. So let's take a look here at the top 10 picks from that draft. So of course, as you remember here, Connor McDavid went number 1 overall to the Edmonton Oilers. At number 2, the Buffalo Sabres selected Jack Eichel. Number 3, the Arizona Coyotes selected Dylan Strome. Of course, Strome was looking like a bust there for quite a while, but he's really thrived with the Chicago Blackhawks since he was traded. The number 4 overall selection belonged to the Leafs, and they took Mitch Marner. Number 5 belonged to the Carolina Hurricanes. They selected Noah Hanifin. The New Jersey Devils picked number 6 and took Pavel Zacha. Number 7 was the Philadelphia Flyers, where they took defenseman Ivan Provorov. The number 8 pick belonged to the Blue Jackets, where they took defenseman Zach Werenski. The number 9 overall selection belonged to the Sharks, where they did select Timo Meier. And the number 10 pick was Colorado, where they selected Mikko Rantanen. Now, one of the details of this trade was the San Jose Sharks' first-round selection at that number 9 overall pick. The parameters of the trade were basically this. The St. Louis Blues were trading defenseman Kevin Shattenkirk and forward TJ Oshie from St. Louis over to San Jose for young forward Thomas Hertl in that first-round selection. So obviously that would have been a mega trade. Both these two teams were in very different places. The St. Louis Blues were coming off a division win. They finished really high in the standings. However, the Blues fell flat in the first round of the playoffs, and even after a terrific regular season like we've seen this year with all the division winners, lost in the first round to the Minnesota Wild 4-2. So they were really looking to go through a little bit of a retool. There was a lot of speculation that summer. They were going to kind of try to change some of the team's core, make some trades, and obviously both of these guys that were supposedly on their way to the Sharks here were eventually both traded, obviously at different times, and they both ended up going to the Capitals. As we know, TJ Oshie was traded that summer as part of a separate deal to the Capitals, and then Shattenkirk was traded to the Capitals later on as a trade deadline deal. So the Blues did end up making some significant changes that summer, but obviously this deal fell through. Now, what caused it to fall through was on the Sharks side. Of course, they had that number 9 overall selection, and it appears as though they were very keen on Timo Meier, who they did select. They must have had a lot of belief or reason to believe that Timo Meier was not going to be available at that draft slot, so they were prepared to make that trade and give up that selection in order to gain the more experienced players in Oshie and Shattenkirk. Now, of course, as we know, Hertl and Timo Meier are having terrific playoff seasons, and it would certainly be a drastic change of events here if they were wearing the opposite jerseys. Now, as good as Timo Meier is, he's certainly working on being a more consistent forward, but he's having himself a terrific playoff year for sure. I do think long-term he will be a great player for the San Jose Sharks, but considering how high they were on him and wanting to select him at the draft, let's take a quick look here at some of the other players that went after him that they could have selected instead had he gone anyways. Obviously, Mikko Rantanen was terrifically having one of the best years here in the NHL as well. The last couple of years have been really solid for him. Went with the next pick at number 10. We saw the Bruins select Jake DeBrusque. The Islanders selected Matt Barzal. The Jets took Kyle Connor. The Senators took Thomas Chabot, who's turned out to be a terrific defenseman. The Canucks later in round one, near the end, took Brock Besser, who's been a terrific goal scorer, and Sebastian Aho, who's certainly having himself quite a campaign. Certainly one of the contenders for the Conn Smythe Trophy, leading his Hurricanes to the Eastern Conference Final this year. Didn't go until round two. So as much as the Sharks were terrifically high on Meier, and that's who they had their eye on here, obviously there was lots of other young talent that they could have selected instead had he not been available at that selection, rather than make this trade. I do think long term this would have been a pretty good deal for the Blues to get some really solid young forwards in Hertl and Meier, or I'm not even sure if it was Meier they would have selected, of course. Had the trade happened and the pick switched over to the Blues, it's hard to say. They may or may not have taken Timo Meier, or they may have had their eye on one of these other terrific young players that is having major impacts on their current NHL franchises here as well. So my question to you today is, if you're either of these teams' general manager back in 2015 for the Sharks or the Blues, would you have made this trade? I do think long term, like I said, it would have been a great deal for the Blues to get these great young forwards. At the same time, the Sharks could have got TJ Oshie, who's had a pretty solid career since being traded from the Blues to the Capitals. He's had some big years over there. Shattenkirk, on the other hand, really hasn't worked out the best. He didn't do the greatest in Washington after he was traded there, and so far his time with the Rangers, where he signed as a free agent, hasn't been great. He's had a lot of injuries. So longer term, I think Shattenkirk would have been the bust of the deal. Oshie would have worked out good, but I wouldn't trade TJ Oshie for two solid young players like Hertl and Meier both, or replace another solid young forward in there for Meier had they selected somebody else with the draft pick. So either way, I think it's pretty safe to say here that the Blues would have won this trade had this actually taken place. They ended up trading both of these players anyways, changing up their team, changing up their core, and the rest, as they say, is history. The trade never happened. Doug Wilson pulled out at the last minute, decided he would rather select Timo Meier since he was still available, and the deal never actually went any further. So especially if you're a fan of either of these teams, let me know what your thoughts would have been on this trade. Certainly very interesting to look back and say what if, and certainly let me know your thoughts and comments down below on deals that you think might be being discussed and potentially happen at this year's 2019 draft, taking place next month in Vancouver. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So subscribe for more videos just like this one, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.